Hey, Sarah.
Yes, Alex?
Do you think I'm a people pleaser?
Huh? No, definitely not. I've never even thought about thinking about that about you. What about me? Am I good at saying no? I'm good at saying no, right?
Yeah, you're obviously great at it.
Awesome. Because we're doing an entire podcast about how we're really good at boundaries and we're going to teach other people how to be good at them too.
Perfect. Good thing we have a guest.
Wait, were you guys just saying that because you thought that's what the other person wanted to hear?
No,
No, definitely not.
absolutely
No.
not.
It was
That was
my
sourced from
my
deep
true
in
self.
my authentic.
Just checking.
Welcome to Mistakes Were Made, a podcast about non-monogamy for messy people like us. I'm Sarah. I'm a queer therapist, parent, writer, and gooder doer at boundaries.
Yes, you are. And that's why you're here recording a podcast the day after you did a gigantic event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I
Because
said
you're good
yes
at saying no
emceeing.
to things. Yeah.
I didn't mean to.
I'm her husband and co-host, Alex, and I am thrilled to be here in spite of that.
And I am Jessica, here producing. Also thrilled to be here. I also just wanted to mention to the listeners that last time we said we would be coming back to finish our mini-sode, and we will be doing that, but we're not doing that on this episode. And maybe just for a little context, we'll talk about this more in a future episode, but perhaps the reason we had to do a mini-sode in the first place is because we couldn't set a healthy boundary with the TV crew that wanted to film us recording said mini-sode.
It's because of TV magic.
Yeah.
TV magic.
They said they wanted to record us recording our podcast, to film us recording our podcast. And then we got partway through it and they were like, okay, that's good. You can stop.
And we were like, but we have pages of script. We worked so hard on.
And we were like, yes, East Coast Media Elite, we will do whatever you say.
You probably know better than us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, today our guest is Calvin Burnap, second-time guest, friend of the podcast, excellent walk partner, gardening mentor, crush coach, meditation teacher, therapist. What else, Calvin? Also, welcome.
A compost lover. I love decomposition.
Compost lover. Yeah, you were just talking about how there is not enough poop in the world.
Well, there's enough poop.
It's just not in the right place.
That's right.
You know, that's just not a position that you hear very often. You want more poop sort of scattered about.
I'll give that some thought.
We'll put a pin in that.
Good boundary.
We'll be coming back to that. Okay, today we're talking about, yes, boundaries through the arc of a relationship. It's a sort of like a boundaries workshop with a what are they and why? Why are they hard? How do they impact relationships? Why are they so important in breakups? So, no big deal. We got this. I'm going to nail this down once and for all.
Okay. Simple.
Okay, so first question. I will throw this out to anyone. What is a boundary? What the hell are we talking about? What is everybody always talking about? What is it?
I'm going to let Calvin take that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was just starting to think about, okay, wait, what is a boundary and how is it different than a guideline? And then I started thinking about the lines on the road, like the things that keep us flowing in the right direction. But of course, anybody can cross those lines at any time. A signal helps. Kind of like maybe expectations. But expectations is also a pretty loaded word, like... so maybe guidelines, like what you think is going to happen and what you can reasonably expect from somebody or want from somebody.
People also talk about guardrails, and that's literally a thing that's on the road.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting that there's like the guidelines, and then there's like the shoulder, and then there's the thing that you would actually run into.
Yeah. Is boundaries the lanes, the lines? I would like to think that there's boundaries that are kind of like the guidance versus like, I'm going to ruin my car, but I'll come to a stop.
Which is maybe the way at previous points in my life I was doing boundaries.
Right.
Insofar as it's a verb.
I like that disambiguation that it's like a gradient, or like, there's sort of layers before it becomes an extreme, like crash. Yeah.
Yeah. The big bottom line. Definitely not going to cross this. Yes, there's times in my life when those were my main boundaries. Like I only knew I had a boundary when I crossed it.
Right. But then as you get older, maybe you get better at like drawing the lines. I'm just gonna go hard on this metaphor. Like earlier on in the relationships or with yourself, you're like, I'm gonna put these dots down the middle so I don't veer into oncoming traffic, and
Yeah.
like so my partners know where the edge is.
Yeah. I was thinking, what are other ways to talk about boundaries that are not the road?
Well, I appreciate how nuanced that is. I'm not sure that that's the way we use it in like emotional vernacular typically. I like it because it helps us begin to understand how they serve us and the sort of point of boundaries. I get the sense, and maybe I get that sense because I have often felt this way, that boundaries are just like, you're doing something I don't like, I need you to stop. You know, if we were just thinking about like Instagram therapy lingo, does that feel like kind of the way most people interpret them or the way it's culturally interpreted? This is why you shouldn't ask a yes or no question. Anybody out there
Yes.
who is
Well, and then where do boundaries line up with preferences? You know, then I started thinking about like the skin is a boundary, right? It's a barrier. And like, I definitely want to have a sense of what's happening to me in the space around my body. I don't want my boundaries only to kick in once you've crossed like the layer of flesh,
right.
right? As far as like safety goes. So actually my physical boundary is more like a sphere all the way around me, protects
Yeah.
the air and land, you know? If you cross that without my agreement, then you've crossed a boundary.
What about, okay, yeah, I like that. That it's not just the actual barrier, it's like something that indicates that you're getting closer to the barrier.
Right. Well, I mean, if you cross my skin and I didn't ask you to, I'd be pissed. You know? Hopefully.
Although that could be like intimacy.
Exactly. Right.
Maybe not like cutting your skin.
Well,
but
if that's what you're
that is
into.
what like physical intimacy is sometimes. Yeah, like
Consensual,
the boundaries. Yeah, getting closer with consent and like the enjoyment of that.
All right, these are lovely metaphors, and I appreciate them, and I do think they're helpful. Also, why are they so hard? You know, I mean, the fact of the matter is, most people I talk to would say they are bad at boundaries or they don't understand what they are.
I mean, we were joking about this in the opening. I think like a lot of it is that like, at least for me, the people pleasing thing or the idea that like, if you say no or want something that is misaligned with what other people that you want to be in a relationship with want, then, you know, you risk rejection. And so it's like hard to do that if you don't feel safe and confident in yourself enough that you're like, I will be okay on my own, even if I hold my boundaries and am rejected. Right?
You guys reminded me of my teachers taught me boundaries are diffuse, permeable, or rigid.
Like those are three categories.
Three categories of boundaries. And like a diffuse boundary is between like parent and newborn skin to skin contact. If your baby cries, you act. You don't think, oh, actually now's not a good time, you know, right? And their cries pierce your eardrums. There's no separation. It's immediate and diffuse.
Well, maybe with your parents. But...
I know, right? Okay, in
No,
an
sorry, go
ideal
on.
situation, right? I know, I hear you, right. And then, of course, rigid boundaries are like a wall, something that you can't get through at all, which would be appropriate if there's danger on the other side of that or somebody who you can't trust yourself or them to be around. You'd be like wanting to have a rigid boundary. I'm never going to talk to that person, no contact. And then everything else in between is permeable. And like just thinking about like what we go through from adolescence, black and white thinking, going from like extremes to trying to learn the middle zone of permeable relational boundaries. That's so like difficult. And so then it's like, we're learning, like you were saying, like what happens if you want something that's different than what somebody else wants, and you're negotiating that. I know for me, flip-flopping between like not enough boundaries, very diffuse, like one night stand becomes spending every day together for 5 months, realizing, oh my God, I need space, right? And then breaking up, right?
Yeah.
There's the rigid boundary.
Yeah.
And just trying to get to the sweet spot of like getting enough, but not too much, giving enough and not giving too much too.
Make it permeable. And that speaks to this idea that it's dynamic and changeable, but still there. I wanted to say that there's this meme that's been going around on Instagram that I don't think it's an exaggeration to say maybe 4 or 5 people have sent me. And it's just like, oh, it's Dr. Devin Price. I don't know if you all follow him. And he's like, if you have a hard time saying no, get on Grindr today and say no to 30 people on Grindr and just like plow through the no and get used to it. Which, first of all, it's interesting that like 5 people sent that to me. And I think that says as much about me as it does about...
Are you on Grindr yet?
I'm not on Grindr yet. But it's kind of an interesting reveal that saying no is really hard for people. And Alex, you identified that I think there's rejection sensitivity in our fear of saying no. I also want to identify that there's, you were all indicating like attachment trauma, that for those of us that didn't quite get that attuned, responsive care that we needed when we were younger, we're often operating from a lack of intimacy. And so there's like this scarcity fear sort of disorganization around that I think is showing up. I also wanted to name that it's a cultural issue. And, rape culture grooms children to not say no and not be in touch with their instincts. And so I think we have to identify that that's part of it too. And it's not just individual pathology. It's also this collective issue where, we were taught from a really early age to hug adults whether or not we wanted to be in situations where we didn't feel safe and keep quiet, that's deep training and it's early training. And this is a theory that I'm working on that I want to throw out to all of you. I think some of the possible like overcorrection we might feel around boundaries in community right now are people trying to find that middle ground that you described, Calvin, that going from being really permeable and not really being able to access any, not really knowing how to exercise boundaries and be in touch with our instincts, we're kind of overcorrecting to lots of walls so that we can hopefully find that more.
Yeah, that reminds me of like exactly what you said. It's like the part of me that should have been able to say no at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old wasn't allowed to. And so I have to do that work later. And it just doesn't look as cute when you're 25, 26 or 40,
It
45.
doesn't.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, it's interesting also to think about, at least for me, like probably my first experience with like learning how to set boundaries was with my family and with my parents. And if you're, struggling or you're not like learning how to do that when you're little, then you do have to do that work later and like maybe primarily with them. Like I think that, I don't know, for me at least it was a big step, and I think it is for a lot of people to be like, there's that trope of just like, I can't say no to my mom and she says I'm coming over and I'm just like, okay, I don't want you to, but I'm not going to say anything. And then maybe that's, at least for me, it was like, figure out how to do that. And I remember I used to struggle a lot, Sarah, with like situations where like you and my family or like my sister, we were like doing things sort of together, and the two of you were like at odds in what I felt like you wanted from me. And because I had no like tools for having boundaries with either party, I was just like I don't know what to do. Fuck. Like, and it had nothing to do with what I wanted. It was just like these two people that I can't say no to want different things. My head's going to explode or whatever. That's like yeah.
Well, and I said it wasn't that cute. What I should have said, because that's not really what I meant. But what you said is like the stakes are higher, and when you get older, the situations are more nuanced. And so I think I've seen in myself and others, unless you have done that work to know what you feel and think in the moment and articulate and know what other people are feeling and thinking and attune to that without like steamrolling them, but without steamrolling yourself. I mean, that's complex.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you haven't gotten that chance to just put your foot down and make mistakes around it at a younger age, the stakes are higher when you're
Yeah.
older, you know?
And I want to identify that for a lot of people, and I'd argue especially a lot of people in radical community, we don't necessarily have that option with our parents. We're not necessarily going to be able to work it out in family of origin relationships later on
Right.
because there's a lot of estrangement there,
Yeah.
especially in queer communities, especially in radical communities. And so we are doing it with each other. And that creates this often uncute, uncute atmosphere. But it's one that I kind of defend because I feel, I don't know, I feel protective of the impulse, the instinct to try and figure it out with each other,
Yeah.
even if it's really messy and frustrating.
Yeah, I do like the acknowledgement that it's not an ideal situation or that it's harder. Like I think what is supposed to sort of happen, supposed to developmentally, is like that you have that diffuse like relationship with your parents as like an infant or child where like they don't have any boundaries with you and like meet all of your needs, and then like you grow up and differentiate from them in the way that you're supposed to, where you start to be like, I don't need you, and they're like, okay, but I'm always here and I still love you. And you like move apart but still have that sort of secure attachment. And if you didn't have that experience, then it's like very hard to go on and replicate what you're supposed to be doing with romantic partners or friends.
I hope we come back to that part around when somebody has a boundary and then somebody has a reaction to it. You know, like somebody else's boundary becomes your emergency.
I mean, I'd love to explore it a little bit now, and maybe we can use it as transition into talking about how these things show up in romantic relationships.
But I thought we were going to start with like getting together first, and then we were going to talk about the hard stuff.
Okay. Hard stuff.
Just
I'm putting it here. This is the hard stuff parking lot. When someone's boundary becomes your emergency, which I really appreciate that description.
we could talk about it from a positive point of view. Like,
ahead.
you know, like when you're starting a new relationship and somebody wants, it's like, even just by saying this, I'm like, what's the difference between a boundary and a preference? You know, I'm struggling.
Yeah. Semantics.
I don't know if it's semantics. I know this gets down into the weeds in a way that is a little bit eye-rolly, but I do think there's a difference between a preference and a boundary. I think a preference is I could move forward with a number of different scenarios or options. This is my preferred one, right? Whereas a boundary for me, at least the way I experience it, is it's like if I'm moving forward against this boundary, I'm doing some psychic damage to myself. Like I will be abandoning myself if I do that. That's what it
Which
feels like
would
to me.
relate to like the sort of like acuity of your like distress in the relationship. Like I think I've had in the same relationship sometimes based on like how I was feeling at the time or like how strained the relationship was, things that would be a preference normally become like a boundary or a really hard need because I'm like, I feel really bad about this and I need you to engage with me in this way. Whereas, you know, that would have been a preference previously when like things were going well.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. Right. If I stay here, it'll hurt in some way or take something away, my dignity. Yeah, that makes sense.
Dignity. I think that's a really good, that really resonates for me. That's what it feels like too. And I certainly have moved forward against boundaries, and that's what it feels like. It feels like I'm losing touch with my dignity. Yeah.
Well, I think in the beginning of a relationship, especially when people are excited, that's like the best time to like give people a sense of what you want it to be like a year from there or 2 years from there. But that's the time when most of us are escalating and spending a lot of time communicating, thinking about each other, and spending time together, doing all kinds of things together. And it's like everything's going against having limitations or putting any limits on things. So, you know what I mean?
So that's the time to name the limits, you're saying.
It's like, what are my healthy boundaries with myself? I've started a new relationship and totally disregarded my own boundaries, right? And the other person has no idea like what I would normally want my life to look like. And so it's sort of a false sense of things. And that's a real betrayal to myself. And then when those boundaries start to come out later, it can feel like a real betrayal. And that's where people could be reactive to it.
Yeah, your betrayal of yourself becomes a betrayal can come to feel like a betrayal of them because you've set these expectations that you can't meet or don't want to.
Naming the romance myth piece of this, it makes me think of Dean Spade's book about how the romance myth would tell us that true love feels like encountering another person where you will never have to negotiate a boundary, you know? And I think that so much of new relationship energy, especially kind of emotionally immature new relationship energy, feels like, oh, I have finally found the person where we are just going to be able to barrel straight ahead, saying yes to each other into infinity.
Becoming the same celestial organism.
Well, but I know that like if you're a hammer, everything's a nail, and I'm an attachment therapist, so everything is attachment trauma. But it does make sense to me that if you didn't get that piece where there were the diffuse boundaries and the attuned care of parents, that that's what you're yearning for. You're looking for that partner that will give that to you. And so when you encounter someone where it feels possible on any level, you just go nuts. Anyway, that's
What about like just getting high on love? Like you're actually like using and enabling each other to get high. You know, that's maybe a different take than the attachment piece. Like, and then you know you have your bender, and then you kind of come up for air, and you're like, oh my god, I have a job, I have friends.
yeah. I mean, I do think that those metaphors can work well together because I think that trauma and attachment trauma lend themselves to addictive behavior and cycles.
Okay, I have a practical question that always comes to me when we talk about like the beginnings of relationships, and all of the things maybe that we want to do at the beginnings. Like, when are you there that you can have that kind of conversation? Like, because I think what happens to me is I'm like, well, I don't know, it's like sometimes I'll like go on some dates with somebody and I'll feel like, oh, we're just like talking about all of this like stuff about like the logistics of our lives and like the way that things would work and wouldn't work and maybe some of this boundary stuff even, and I'm not like sure I even like the person, or like want to be doing that with them. So I think sometimes what happens is like we play this game back and forth of kind of like flirting our way into a relationship, and then maybe we would do that, and it's like, and then we look back and we're like, oh, we're like in a relationship now, and we never had those conversations because we weren't sure when the time was to do it. You know what I mean?
Well, I think this is the part about boundaries I get so excited about is like, do you have to talk about them? And how do you make sure that you're honoring your boundaries?
Like you're saying, maybe it's not a negotiation with the other person. It's more about yourself.
Yes, like classically, I'll hear somebody say like, I told them I had this boundary and then they crossed it. And I'm just like, well, what did you expect? Do they want the same thing as you? Is that their boundary too? I mean, of course, it's nice if somebody is like curious and interested in our boundaries and like wants to respect it because they care about us, but it assumes that they have the same preference.
And in a way, it has to start with you being in touch with yourself. Again, I think that like opportunity to be in relationship with ourselves first is so important. And we tend to skip over that and be like, this person is going to give me what I'm looking for, that respect, that dignity, that love, that care. But I have learned that spending a little more time with myself and trying to understand what are my needs? What are my boundaries? What am I looking for? Then allows me to not actually have endless conversations with people about it. Because, I'm trying to think of a relatively like innocuous example. Um, I'm like not a huge texter, right?
Hmm.
I just like don't do a lot of texting, and it takes me a while to get back to people. Uh, and instead of having a big long conversation about like what my text needs might be and what someone else's text needs might be, I just try and be my authentic self in the beginning. And if it comes up that someone is like, I really want or need more text connection, maybe we can have a conversation about it. But I also wouldn't misrepresent myself, because I know myself well enough in this respect to know it's not changing for anybody. And it's not a reflection of how much I love them, how much I want to have sex with them, anything. It is just kind of fundamental to the way my life works and the way I want it to work.
But Sarah, what if you don't text them and then they think you don't like them and then they don't ever say that? They're just like, oh, well, I guess Sarah doesn't like me. And, you miss out on having the relationship because of that.
I'm going to say it was going to never work out because she doesn't text them back. They're never going to be happy.
But shouldn't you abandon yourself a little bit and
Just a little bit.
Just a little.
Just a little bit in the beginning.
and be different at the beginning? No, I'm joking, but that is like what I find myself doing sometimes.
Totally.
It's like,
And then you find yourself in a relationship that doesn't work because, well, not you specifically, but
no, me too.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking of, that 5-month relationship I was mentioning that where we spent every day together. Like I was very young and I didn't realize until after that I wouldn't actually want to do that with a partner ever.
Right.
Even a best friend,
Right.
barely with my dog whom I love, every day together, all day, every day.
Yeah.
And I think that this again touches on the romance myth that I tend to think, and maybe we collectively think, that true love will transform us into someone we are not. And that is not true. I think that love, if we're talking about the bell hooks kind of definition of stretching towards the spiritual growth and development of another and having them stretch back towards you, is about growing into new versions of yourself, but not just a complete, we're not transforming. We're growing from what we are. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about meeting somebody?
Like, how
Like,
do
what
you do
about
it? I'm
moving-
also
No.
curious.
No, sorry. Not physically
Oh.
meeting somebody or logistically, but like, because I don't know if I think I kind of don't agree with what you said, Calvin, that like it wouldn't work out. Like I was obviously like joking about what I was saying that Sarah should do in that situation, but I do think sometimes there is like things that you can do to like move towards somebody in a relationship. Like, isn't it kind of like an individualist take to be like, I'm going to be like wholly contained over here and I'm not going to like move in the direction of somebody that I want to be in relationship with? Isn't that what relationship is?
That's good. I mean, you're right. There's some nuance there and flexibility. It's like also requires some self-awareness to be like, is this adjustment something I can keep up, or is it something I'm going to resent later? Is this, sustainable? Absolutely.
Right.
I wonder if a possible like permeable boundary here would be something more along the lines of, are there other things that I can do that
Like with the text example.
that help you know I'm interested in you and that I'm excited about you? Like, and I'm trying to think of what that might be, but like planning dates or planning to like show up to things that you're doing, or engaging with your social media, or I'm trying to think about it.
I think what you're pointing to actually is another part of the conversation around how quickly we move to negotiating and making offers. And I think not skipping over just hearing somebody out and listening to them and sort of caring for how they might feel sad or not cared for. And not making any offers and not trying to solve any problems, because the difference between you isn't a problem. It's just part of what you're going to be working with.
That I had physical response to you
Was it
saying
good
that.
or bad?
It was, I mean, it was the response of something that's true but hard. The difference between you is not a bad thing. It even, to explore that it's a neutral thing. It just is. The difference just is. That's so hard.
Yeah. And that like holding your partner's feelings or wants, but not fixing them. Yeah.
Yeah, neither of you is bad or wrong.
I have this thought also about community because I was thinking about all the signal groups that I'm a part of. I'm a part of a lot of signal groups. And how I have a different communication style in those signal groups. Those tend to be groups where there are some people who are in there every single day, responding to stuff every day. Again, not me. I tend to like show up there when I need to, when I'm specifically called upon, whatever. You all will tell me if I'm wrong about this. I get the sense that because that's a more, it's a broader community, that there's more tolerance for difference. There's more ways that we can kind of like pick up the slack and respond to each other in a kind of a way that feels natural, like we're moving the resources around a little bit. I don't know. Is that
I mean, I
too
feel
abstract?
like in the signal groups that I'm in, a lot of what it is people updating their name or their handle to be like, blah, 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 low energy or like, offline for like setting boundaries where they're literally just saying like, I'm not going to be available during this time or I'm going to respond less during this time, which
Sometimes people do that, and then I'll hear somebody be like, I said I was offline, but people are still messaging me. To me, the announcement that you're offline isn't the boundary.
Yeah.
The boundary is happening on the back end.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's like, I would change my name because it would help people know what to expect from me.
Yeah, I love that. That's like a perfect, like, simple example of what you're talking about, right? Like, yeah. I had a talk to somebody like before mask wearing was a big thing. Somebody from Asia before COVID who was talking about like at the time why they would wear a mask when they were sick, and they were like, it's not really for any other reason than that it shows people what my sort of like capacity is, and then they can engage with me based on that, which like kind of helps everybody. It helps like give a cue like, oh, this person is not like at 100%, but it also helps them probably feel like, if somebody comes and talks to me and I just want to phone it in a little bit, that's okay. I've given them this cue that I'm like not all there.
I love that.
Yeah.
I wish mask wearing had become widespread in the US.
Yeah.
I think about grief rituals in other cultures and how wearing like a black armband, for example, was a way. I mean, the reason why people wore black was a way of just indicating kind of where you were and what you were feeling and experiencing so that people could engage with you in a way that was sensitive. I want to transition into the next section, but I want to say something else about community, individualism, and the romance myth before we do. You know how you said it's too individualistic for you not to be willing to change some of your behavior in order to meet someone in a romantic relationship?
I did say that, yes.
Remember how you said that just a few minutes ago, and I didn't like it?
I might have been devil's advocating a little bit, but
Also, I'm sitting with
I
the
am.
difference, and it's
Yeah.
neutral and fine. But
I am a white man. It's my job to do that on this podcast.
to play the devil's
To
advocate,
annoyingly
yes, thank you.
devil's
Thank you
advocate
very
when I feel
much.
uncomfortable. Everybody needs
Really
it.
appreciate
Yeah.
it. I think there is something. There's something that sits with me wrong about this idea that the romantic relationship just requires more stretch, more self-abandonment
Then another kind of relationship?
than other types of relationships.
Yeah.
And in community. And I was just thinking about like, I wouldn't think of it as sustainable. It's not sustainable for me to just keep changing based on the needs of a broad community signal group. Like, I just kind of instinctually understand that more. And I was like, I'm going to end up letting everybody down like within the month, Whereas there is some other kind of pressure in a romantic relationship to change just a little bit, stretch just a little bit. Like, don't be selfish. don't,
Yeah.
that you're sort of missing the point of the romantic relationship if you aren't more willing to do that. And I just wanted to like throw it out there and see how it lands.
Makes me think about relationship anarchy and like not trying to control other people and like advocating for myself, but not making those demands on one person. That I can have my needs met seeking out other places. It's kind of just like a setup. I mean, probably come back around to this on the show a lot of just how much of a setup it is, the nuclear family.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not anybody's fault, but just kind of maybe a pressure release valve to say like, we all have tons of desires and needs and preferences, and it's like pretty wild to think one other person relationally is gonna be able to adjust. I mean, I'm a recovering grump, so
Wait, say more about that.
well, I just used to be so grumpy and just kind of moody.
Because of like resentment in your relationships, do you think, or
Just, we'll just chalk it up to trauma and
Okay.
personal issues. But I have had a very loving and accepting partner who kind of enjoyed that I was grumpy sometimes. So that helped me actually learn and grow out of that. I think being exposed to more people and like having some freedom, to move about and make new connections just contributed to my own growing and learning, and not putting demands on one other person.
yeah, how does that map to polyamory, where you're maybe putting demands on many other people? I guess
I like
Or-
that description where it's like just a bunch of nuclear families.
Yeah, or like clearly, we talk about it a lot on this show because that is the sort of like, the sometimes sort of justification for polyamory, or like is through that lens of like, well, you can't get everything you need from just one person. But I guess what I find myself doing sometimes is like being like, but I'm gonna just get everything I need from like 3 people, whatever, which is maybe still the same problem, right?
Interesting. I don't know what to say.
Like, or I guess I'm just like, where this is coming from for me is having the like pleasant experience recently of people that I met like on dating apps and that I started like down a romantic road with, or like a relationship, that kind of relationship road with, like not wanting to do that with me. And it was mostly initiated on their side. Like maybe it was sort of mutual vibes, but I probably would have done it. And then those people becoming friends, and those friend relationships being like more like kind of like generative and like really like helpful in my life in ways that they wouldn't have been if they were like a bunch of different romantic relationships that I was trying to maintain in that way. So I guess it's just making me think about how maybe in relationships that I think about as romantic, I just do that abandonment of self thing a lot. And when they're friendships, I do it less. And then it's much more sustainable. Now you guys say something.
Well, yeah, the abandonment of self, I was thinking it's like where we get into trouble with boundaries, I think, is when I have a sudden change in what I want. And I try to enforce that on somebody else, and I get upset when they don't want what I want. It's like if you set a precedent, how certain things are going to roll out when you first meet, it's reasonable to expect that that's going to continue. And then people often are reactive when you're saying like suddenly, oh, I'm not going to do what I was doing. But that's where I think maybe we can be a little more forgiving when people have a change. And it's hard, right? But to work with the feelings and not try to make it a problem again.
And being curious about where things are difficult, that compassion that you're talking about, it's so important. It's so challenging. As you were talking, I want to share something that is hard to share. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Is it about me?
No.
If so, keep it to yourself.
No.
Is it about me?
No. Not anymore. No, because no, I'm just kidding.
It should be good.
It's about dating men.
So it is about me.
I noticed that I drink more when I'm on dates with men. I drink more in my relationships with men. And as I've taken a break from dating and been a little bit more in touch with myself about dating men, I've just been drinking a lot less. And it made me think about how I think it's really hard for me to have boundaries with men. And if I'm a little bit drunk or if I've had some drinks, then I can do the self abandoning without noticing. And so I think that also contributes to probably both of you have observed that sometimes I would go out with a guy and have a lot of fun and report that. And then in the following week, be kind of distressed and be like, maybe I didn't have fun. And I think that that was part of it. And so it just kind of that being interested, curious, and compassionate about the where it's hard, that compulsive feeling, that where you're just like really inclined to do the self-abandoning, so much so that, I don't know, you're even drugging yourself a little bit in order to do it.
Well, just going back to the attachment and childhood stuff, it's like the kinds of like getting to try something out to please somebody else. Like we should get to try that when we're younger, and our parents shouldn't be the main foil. So if my parents are constantly controlling or telling me what I can and can't do, and I don't have a self-generated sense of what I want to do, then I wouldn't have had a lot of experimentation with saying I want to go out with somebody and decide I regretted it, and then get good support. Like usually, I'm thinking about my childhood, of course. Like I would have to be so headstrong to make something happen that I couldn't ever admit I didn't like it. So it took me a long time to kind of get back into alignment with myself and even be able to track and then choose what's best for me. That wasn't just like a total rebellion even against my own well-being.
Yeah. And those patterns in our earliest relationships with caregivers and them being that foil that you describe, it's so powerful. The next question on here was what are boundaries that you all struggle to honor if you had to identify them? And I was doing that a little bit with the drinking thing, but also with, I think with women partners, I struggle to have a boundary about listening to them talk in intimate ways about their other relationships. And you can really track this to my mom and dad. So my dad was into lots of like physical danger in the world and like sort of buddyified me in that. And so I was often doing things that felt physically scary. But that was how I could be close to him. And so I overrode those instincts. And with my mom, she was often confiding in me about all her dissatisfaction in her relationships, including her relationship with my dad. And so you can see how that's like a particularly hard boundary for me to hold in those relationships. So now I answered that for myself.
Thank you.
Anybody else can also answer if they want. They don't have to.
Well, just to come back to the like not controlling people, when I think about how to do a good boundary in the moment if somebody's talking more than I'm comfortable listening to, or even if I'm distracted and I can't listen, that good way to do that isn't to give them any feedback. It's just to say, oh, hold on, I actually can't keep listening right now, or I need to pause this. How to make it an interactive in the moment request versus like a overarching general boundary.
I hate it when you tell me about your boyfriend.
Exactly.
Sweeping statements, black and white statements.
Yeah. Or like, I just can't listen to this much talking. That would be criticism, and that's one of the Gottman Institute's 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. giving feedback like that that's harsh, that's never going to go well. It's not going to result in the other person feeling good, and it's actually not going to result in a good boundary.
So if there, I really appreciate that basically you're doing it, you're kind of like in a setting, holding the boundary, identifying the boundary internally for yourself, and like finding a kind of like non-conflictual way to sort of articulate it or set it. If it's a pattern, do you think at some point you should be like, I've noticed this comes up a lot for me, but like, what is your sort of advice for that? Like, should you ever take that to the partner in a more critical way, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think nonviolent communication is a really good tool right there to not make any dig on the other person and not make any part of them a problem. But like, it's like, how to be like, I realize when I'm listening, sometimes I end up checking out, and I don't want to do that when I'm listening to you. And actually what I need is to take more breaks, or to maybe get a heads up when you're going to share something a little more personal, so I can really prepare myself and let you know if I'm in a good place, that kind of thing. To me, that would be the best way to bring it up, to really frame it as a self-realization. And in order for me to show up at my best, I'm realizing that, these are the things that would help me. And then again, that doesn't control the other person. It doesn't say that I have to have these or else. It just says like, hey, if you want me to be a good listener, this is what would set me up to succeed. And if that doesn't happen, I might not be a great listener. And like, if you're okay with that, maybe then we can just go ahead, and that I'm kind of checked out. Or I might say, I really don't feel good about this, and can we pause?
Yeah. I keep thinking about the different types of boundaries you described. The wall, I'm imagining like a screen as the permeable one.
Exactly.
And then I guess a vapor as what is the word I keep forgetting?
Diffuse.
The diffuse one. That what you're describing is it's the screen.
Yeah.
We're not at a wall. We're not at a vapor. We're just like checking in with ourselves and each other as we go.
Yeah, I'm not trying to shut you out. But I'm also admitting that I exist.
Right. And that I'm being impacted.
Yeah.
Which, gets me back to the parking lot. Remember we put the thing there that was when your boundary becomes my emergency?
Yeah.
Is this a good place for that?
Yes, I'm so impressed with your memories.
Yeah. Tell me more what you mean by that, because that really landed with me as something I've experienced.
Well, I was reminded of I can't remember, one of my teachers had shared when you're in a relationship and it's hard for somebody to say no. And related to what you're saying about reaction, we can be very reactive when we have to say no, but we can also be really reactive when we hear a no, or, a limitation. And so the way to work with that, I found works really well, is like, just go out and try to get as many no's as possible, just like the grinder thing you said. But, do it with your friends around like things that you normally wouldn't ask for. So for me, it was like, I'm going to ask my friend if I can borrow his car, which I normally would never ask. Well, a certain friend I'm thinking of. Or like, I'm going to ask for things that just seem so extra.
Like outlandish?
Yeah, exactly. Would you mind going to the store for me and picking up this list of groceries? Like things that I wouldn't be upset if you said no, because I'd be like,
that's a wild thing to ask.
Exactly. Yeah. But then you kind of like, it's hard to make those asks because you feel ridiculous. And like, you're just like, I'm so selfish, whatever your, narrative is about asking for stuff. I'm a burden is a big one. And then if you get a no, it still stings, but it's like, you didn't really need it. And it was kind of bigger than you would normally ask for. And you just kind of like build up the tolerance for getting rejected. And that's, to me, the counterphobic approach to like most of us, if we have a hard time asking for things and have a hard time hearing no, have a hard time saying no, we really hold out until the last possible moment to make a real ask. And then we're desperate to hear yes. That's a total setup because then, the other person might feel pressured to say yes. But that's the other side of it. If I've heard somebody say no to me, dozens of times and then they finally say yes to me, I can really trust that they mean it because they've rejected me so many times.
Yeah. Yeah. A
What-
no is a path to intimacy in
Yeah.
both directions. Yeah.
But what if they say yes and do go to the grocery store for you and then resent that you asked them?
Well, that's kind of their business.
I got really worried about that too.
Yeah.
Resentment, is an unspoken agreement. So like maybe discovering like maybe the unspoken agreement is if you ask me for something, I have to say yes. And so maybe that's an opportunity if I find out about the resentment to share some clarity. You never have to say yes to me, but I guess I'd have to really mean that.
Has this kind of thing like played out for you, or like are you drawing on experience in saying this, or
No,
is it
I'm
hypothetical?
I'm just ad-libbing.
Okay.
And this stuff is so difficult. I have
I'm like, how often are you getting groceries delivered by
Actually,
your
no,
friend?
my roommate brought me ice cream last night, and then my other roommate brought me like pirate booty from.
Did you ask them to?
They were like, we're going to the store, and normally I'd be like, I'm fine, no.
Uh-huh,
And then I was
okay.
like, well, my one roommate, I was like, what's your favorite thing at Trader Joe's? And they told me this pirate booty thing, and I was like, sure, I'll have that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, for me, it is kind of like getting to like open up and say yes to things and like kind of try things out and building trust through more interaction rather than kind of being like, no, I'm fine. No,
I'm
no.
self-contained. Yeah. Okay. But you're not like randomly just like, Jessica, could you rotate my tires on the car? Like,
Just to see
I
what
don't really
happens?
need it. I just want to see what happens.
I do
when
though.
ask
Actually,
you to
sometimes
do
I'm like, this is probably too much to ask for. And I'm going to do it anyway. Like, if you have time, would you be willing to switch my laundry over? Like
Yeah.
things
Yes.
that you wouldn't
Okay.
normally ask your roommate to do.
Mhm.
Or like friends, I have a dog who I spend 24/7 with and I have to ask for help. So it does kind of like, I've just got to throw a lot of pasta at the wall and just hope something sticks,
And I think that speaks to relationship anarchy in the sense that you can have different types of intimacy and different types of relationships. And so if you have like a need, this comes up for us a lot with childcare.
Yeah.
That made me think of it when you're talking about your
Like
dog.
literally right now, our friend is taking care of our kids.
And
Yeah.
how the intimate kind of community that we've built is one where people really do say no to each other about those asks, and you are kind of over asking a little bit, and they're kind of over asking a little bit too, and we just all have to understand that we are going to be saying no to each other sometimes, and also that it's a big enough community that we can ask someone else, that it's not like there's just 2 relationships where we can ask that of, or 3 relationships, but that there's more.
Okay, well, that brings up this other idea about taking turns. Like in every relationship or combo of relationships, you never want to get stuck in a role. Like a common one is like one person's the gas and one person's the brakes. Like one person's like more, the other person's like leave me alone. So in all those situations, including with childcare, you never want somebody to be in the group doing all of the childcare and somebody never caring for the kids, because that's resentments, burnout. Yeah.
And that when there's a big enough community, that there's a natural kind of equilibrium that I feel like we're able to get to. Whereas earlier on in having kids, because I was afraid of that intimacy and I only had it with a few people, there was an overburdening that was happening and that would, build resentment.
But yeah, but if there's multiple people, then that the like sort of burden and the capacity is like always moving between the many different parties, and thus like maybe it kind of balances more.
Yeah. Well, and like for self-regulating, to notice if I'm always kind of saying no or not offering, to maybe check in and see where that's coming from. And like that's where communication could go a long way, to acknowledge like, hey, I know I haven't watched the kids at all in the past month. Like, how's it going? How are you feeling about that?
Yeah.
And again, to not make that necessarily a problem solving, because my limitation might continue, for some reason, but at least caring for the feelings and coming to a mutual understanding about what it's like for you and what's been going on for me.
That we can have conversations about these things without it being conflict or solving them, but that we can acknowledge them in between that space.
Yeah, really listening and like respecting each other and understanding where you're coming from. I know if I was doing a lot of work, which I've been in caretaking roles, like if the other person's like checks in and is like, I know you're doing a lot, how's it going? That really just changes my attitude. I'm like, I got this, I can keep going.
Yeah.
It really does. I was just telling you, Alex, how the people in my life who will be like, hey, I've noticed that you've been doing something that might be hard and I'm wondering how you're feeling. It's a small handful of people who will actually open up those conversations because there might be difficult things behind it,
Right.
but it is such an incredible act of care. It means so much to me. Yeah.
When people avoid asking like, hey, I noticed, will you tell me what's going on? I think there's a fear of engaging because what if you ask me for something and I can't say no?
Oh my gosh.
I know the podcast isn't just limited to Seattle, but Seattle's known for like the freeze.
Yes.
And I think it's actually a lack of capacity to hear somebody's request and not necessarily say yes or no, but actually just keep being like, so you're looking for a place to stay tonight? Like, just ask a follow-up question. Where did you stay last night? Where do you usually stay? Oh, and like, what kind of place are you looking for? At no point do you have to feel pressured to be like, I have to solve this problem.
Right.
It's not my problem to solve. It's just someone's engaging. But I think the Seattle Freeze of course, has a lot of things tied to it, but just like not opening up to a stranger who's just like, hey, I'm looking for directions. You can just be like, oh, that's cool. I can't help you,
Yeah.
but I hope you find what you're looking for. That's a beautiful boundary to just
Right.
not be closed and have basically a wall between you, but not also feel like, oh my God, if I talk to this person, I'm going to have to house and clothe them for the next year.
Yes.
There's something in between there.
Yeah.
The mesh screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we were having that conversation, we were talking about mutual aid and like somebody's relationship, the speaker's relationship to the like family that they were working with and like having a hard time knowing when to like stop helping or like how much was enough and like setting boundaries with somebody who's like in a more vulnerable position with you that you've like created a relationship of, imbalanced care. That's hard. And I think sometimes that fear stops people from even entering such relationships in the first place.
Yeah, even the checking in. So coming back to the boundary piece around like, I know what I maybe don't know exactly what I'm up for, but I know I'm kind of like beginning to feel resentment or beginning to feel tired of this, or maybe I've just been stuck in the role of provider for too long, providing emotional support or whatever. To just say like, hey, I think I'm starting to get full, or I'm starting to get close to how much I can do here,
Yeah.
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 What's interesting with all of this like advice is that or like ways that we sort of might want to be around these things as ourselves, we can't trust that everybody else that we're in relationship with or in community with is gonna be able to do that, or is gonna be like, or like they're in some other, like ideally they're doing that work but they're in some other like place on that journey. And so that's what makes me think about like the individualist versus collectivist part is like, if I really want to be doing that for myself, but I might like be bouncing up against people who like don't communicate well about it or don't do all of these things that we're talking about. Like everybody is not going to be showing up in this like idealized frame. The best we can hope for is that we are.
And even then we probably won't.
And
right?
then we probably won't. And then we'll probably be in conflict with people who are not, and who are like, in the like childcare metaphor, people who are not going to do what you said and are instead going to like feel guilty about not having done something, but not say anything. And sometimes people respond and become like sort of hostile when they feel bad about something that they've done or haven't done. Right. And we have to like be able to be patient with that or like whatever the many different things that people do when they're struggling with these kinds of boundaries things. And then we can't do the thing that is like, well, I'm fucking doing this so well. And like Calvin came and talked on my podcast and I figured out how I'm going to be and nobody else is doing that. So fuck all them. Like I'm going to like shun them or whatever, right? But it can kind of be like, that's a hard thing to do, right?
Well, that sounds very lonely.
Yeah, of course.
I'm gonna miss you. And also in that, it's like the fragile like self is like either you're bad or I'm bad.
Right.
And that's a example of probably too diffuse boundaries, because it's either you or me. And when we get into that, that's like early childhood stuff. Like, and so that's a good cue to be like, okay, nobody here is bad, right? But then also the other part is when somebody shares like, okay, I've been doing too much and I'm totally pissed about it and resentful. That's my time to be non-defensive and be like, okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know, and just kind of take a beat and give them some space. Even if you want to give them a piece of your mind, like, well, I didn't ask you for that and you shouldn't have blah, 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 blah. It's like, this happens a lot in couples therapy where everybody's trying to like one up each other. And like, Dr. Sue Johnson has a great book, and the Demon Dialogues, where it's like find the bad guy, protest polka, or the other one is like surrender and withdraw. But when somebody shares a boundary, it's not time to then be like, well, my boundary is this, or, one up. Right. Just listen. You'll get your time to talk and share your feelings if the relationship continues. And if it doesn't continue, then you don't really need to spend all that energy sharing your opinions and stuff. How to actually just hold space and be the listener, be in that role for a little bit, and then just let the conversation end. Later on, say, if you want to be like, I had some more thoughts about what we were talking about, and I wonder if you'd be willing to hear them. Right?
Yeah. It makes me think about how I have to keep getting more used to having mid experiences. Sometimes like, okay, as someone who struggled with social anxiety in my life, one of the ways that I've been trying to undo that is just being like, a lot of social interactions that you have are going to be mid. They're not going to feel great, right, and they won't be disasters. And I think that that's part of that, just like holding space between the black and the white, the good and the bad, the great and the horrible that you're describing. And I was like, this is kind of mid. And I don't know how this is going. Yeah. But that's okay. And perhaps it will be revealed or not, but also okay.
Can I put you on blast for a minute?
Yes.
This is like coming from a person who you once confessed to me that like when you were a teenager, you would be like hanging out with somebody or like going on a date with somebody, and you would like have prepared a list of questions or conversation prompts to like make sure that it was more than a mid experience, right?
Yeah.
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 So cute.
Yeah. You might hear beneath that someone who was desperate for the attention of their caregivers and constantly trying to figure out how to get it.
Well, it was very charming to me.
Yeah, I'm
the
glad
conversation flowed because you had pre-curated it.
Yeah, that could come across as really sweet that someone bothered to put in the time to prepare.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's true. I mean, I do think that our weaknesses are our strengths, and our trauma is often our superpower. And it's like, we just have to be in conversation with those things. I am genuinely curious about people, and I love finding ways to connect with them. And I'm always thinking about how I could do that better. And also, I don't want my lovability to be, I don't want every engagement that I have to be a referendum on my lovability, So just finding that in between. Anyway, so we didn't get to the breakups part yet.
No,
because I feel like we figured it all out in this hypothetical relationship and things are going really well. And so we're never going to break up.
Probably will never end.
This is such a healthy hypothetical relationship that we've built. But
well, when boundaries change and preferences change, that's when breakdowns can occur, right? Where you have your feelings hurt, what do you mean we spent every night together and now you don't want to spend the night with me, that kind of thing. But also like reduction in intimacy often happens after 6 to 18 months, where you just kind of have other things that you start wanting to attend to, maybe that you didn't do in the first part of the relationship. And like that change in intimacy often can be really painful for people, and they can feel rejected. And then people start to think, maybe we should break up. Maybe that means we're not meant to be together. And so that's why earlier I said, like, at the beginning of the relationship, you really want to practice what you intend to later on. You don't have to be like vigilant about it, but if you know that you're not going to want to text all day long every day for the rest of your relationship, maybe don't start there. Or, if you do it one day, just like roll it back. You don't have to explain yourself. You can just be true to yourself, as you said.
Yeah. And in this hypothetical relationship, we've reached a point where we're not in the relationship. We're talking about not being in the relationship anymore. We might be breaking up. How do boundaries help us here at this stage? What do we need to know about boundaries there? Because I think this is where, like you were saying, where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
This is where that shit gets real. I think in breakups in particular, it's like the PhD level test of boundaries.
It's true. I mean, I'm historically somebody who's like kind of on and off. So, like, I've had a few times when we've broken up and got back together. So I don't know, what are you all thinking?
But are you saying like one day you're just like, that's it?
Or like, yeah, the other person will say it's over, and then I'm like, kind of move on pretty quickly.
Interesting. I guess I want to name that, like, the typical ways that breakups happen, as informed by culture and society and whatever, is like extreme intimacy, like you're talking about on the front end, and then that extreme intimacy getting replaced by extreme intimacy with another person. And like that is like the kind of common understanding is like, I've met someone else.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm, moving back from what you and I are doing together to like, because of my preference for being with myself more.
My love of gardening.
Yeah. As a random example. But instead, like, oh, another person showed up. So I think that's where it can create a lot of like vigilance inside of a relationship and like even poly relationships, right?
Yeah.
Like,
especially poly relationships, because it's actually like, somebody's maybe looking to date other people, and then you're kind of constantly being like, is this person going to replace my rank on the pole?
Right. Which is different than what you described.
Right. Okay, right. We're talking about boundaries. There's so much here.
There's so much. Yeah, I feel overwhelmed in this
And like,
moment.
how often do relationships end not because of that thing, or poly relationships end not because of that thing actually happening, but the feeling that it might happen. And then maybe like, if I'm feeling like that, I might be like, this isn't fun anymore because I'm so vigilant about your other relationships that like, I'm out, and maybe I don't even know that for myself, but I kind of come up with some other excuse or I come up with some perceived transgression. Like maybe that's where the weaponized boundaries come in, is like, well, but you said you were not going to do XYZ thing, and now I don't trust you anymore, and that trust is broken. And so that's it.
Yeah. Whew.
Yeah.
I'm stressed out even hearing that.
I'm like extremely stressed out right now. I just want to name that I have to go to the bathroom.
Sorry, guys.
It's cool that it's like sort of like, oh my God, this really gets you where you live, this stuff.
Yeah.
And people can be quite reactive, like, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is like, I know relationships are everything, but I also really hope that everybody I'm working with and myself and all my friends, that we have other things going on than our romantic relationships. Because I think when it's like, that's all that someone has going on, and I think sometimes that can be a monogamous, like, single partner arrangement, or it could be you have multiple relationships and you're constantly negotiating, and that's kind of all the main thing that's happening. It could feel really catastrophic when a change happens or something feels threatened.
Right.
So to me, that would be a call to balance. Where is my, connection to community that's not through romance? Where's my connection to the earth and the environment and, other kinds of relationships, right?
Yeah, totally.
Relationship to my body. I find that in these moments, I really want to return to like dance and running. It feels like, I was like, what is my relationship to my body? Maybe I've forgotten because it's been so defined by sex with other people. And I'm out of balance in that way. Yeah.
Like what would we all be doing if we were suddenly single? Like how would we be working with that? Maybe that could be a good like way to prompt some wisdom around balance.
Important caveat, because I know that people are looking for a loophole already. Single, and you have to stay that way for some period of time.
Right.
Maybe single and heartbroken.
Or
Single and heartbroken, and you have to stay single.
okay.
Or like, what
do you
if-
know the people I know?
if like romantic relationships just cease to exist.
Right. For 1 year.
Yeah.
There are no romantic
I
relationships.
mean,
in
who
the
would
entire
feel
world.
relieved by that a little bit?
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm the only person who put up my hand. And
Are you breaking up with me, Sarah?
But to this point, I would be relieved by that for exactly what you're describing. Not because I don't love or romantic relationships or find them infinitely fascinating and sources of growth and joy, but because I know there's so much else I want to do, and I sometimes feel trapped by the overimportance of them.
I kind of set us up because that's a boundary. That's a like arbitrary boundary that, it's like, I think sometimes we're looking for someone else to throw down a boundary that we have to run up against,
Oh,
Right.
and like the relief that comes when it's like, I'm grounded. I have to stay home. I can't go do anything else. There is the sort of like, oh, I feel so sad. I'm being left out. But then like, the word grounded, I'm like, I'm getting grounded. Yay.
feels good. Yeah.
But now you're making me think about like why people are attracted to authoritarianism.
Yeah. You just want your parents
Yeah.
to tell you, but also you don't want them to.
You just want them to care enough about you that they are trying to do what's best for you and willing to stay through whatever the outcomes are. That's all I'm looking for.
Cool.
Parents or guardians.
Or guardians, yeah. Attachment figures, right? I know we don't want to talk about this, but our hypothetical relationship has broken up.
Okay.
I understand that that's difficult for us. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because I think some of the hardest moments in my life have been around breakups and what my values and boundaries are there. And so I just wanted to honor that it's really hard. And how do you decide once you've broken up with someone about staying in relationship with them, about, what time you need to transition the relationship, about maybe not staying in relationship with them, because inevitably you are not on the same page with the person that you are breaking up with, and Jessica, your sort of famous line, you can't go through a breakup together. That
I love
is
that.
so important, and has been such sage wisdom for me and many of my clients. So you do need to differentiate. You do need to like have some conflict about how that's going to happen.
I would say you can't also disappoint somebody and please them in the same conversation.
That's right.
Don't try to do it all in one. Just, keep it super simple. Everybody knows like it's not you, it's me, and like, I think that's solid advice with the breaking up. It's don't give any feedback. If you're truly trying to end the relationship, time for feedback is over. It's no longer
God, I love that.
pertinent, right? If you're trying to stay in the relationship, then you can ask, are you open to feedback? But it's still, you don't have to give it and you don't have to accept it, although that might be a deal breaker.
Well, can I just jump in here? Because I just deeply agree with this and it resonates with me. It's like rings like a bell. And I also have received a lot of pushback from people who are like, you owe me feedback. You owe me an explanation. And I have run over my own better instincts in those moments. So I just wanted to...
Well, that's where you double down. So this is another thing about boundaries. I'm sure people have heard these on Instagram or TikTok. It's like when you set a boundary, you don't have to be very creative. You can just keep saying the same thing over and over again. You don't have to give in. I don't even want to say give in. You don't
even have to acknowledge the request.
Well, you can say, I'm here. I hear you really want some feedback right now. And all I can say, like, the real feedback is I've come to a realization that this relationship isn't working for me anymore. And like I said, it's not about you. And and who you are, and I really wish you all the best. And ultimately, I've decided for me, it's not the right match.
This is so good, and it also, it sounds ice fucking cold.
Well,
you know
It is,
it does,
but
Calvin.
but it is because it's like you can't please them, or what am I going to say that's going to be so satisfying to the other person?
Well, and the desire for that on either end is a hedge against the relationship actually ending, right? It's like moving back towards, like, if I ask you, like, there's people demanding feedback from you, are trying to like preserve the intimacy between you.
I'm like,
and you don't
call
want
me
that.
in 6 months.
Right.
If you still want feedback,
Yeah.
we'll do it. If you really, really still want it. But if it's like, like you're saying, is it a hedge against the relationship, or like something like you don't want to say goodbye, or you want to prove or argue with me? If I'm done, I'm done. I mean, this is because you guys said our relationship is over. If it was like,
It's over.
Okay.
Yeah, it is over.
It's over.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
It's
sure?
over.
Don't hedge.
It's over.
I need you to tell me why, though.
I think that
For the sake of the experiment, that's why.
we had a beautiful time together, and I learned so much. And I don't want to go forward in this relationship anymore because it doesn't feel right to me.
If it was so awesome and you learned so much, why are you leaving us now?
Because it's time for me to move on, and it doesn't feel right to stay.
I mean, I just want to say the podcast has to be like less than 90 minutes, but maybe down the road you can come back again. We don't have to end the relationship.
I feel so desperate. I don't want to leave, and I'll do anything to stay, including get in a fight with you.
Yeah, get in a fight.
But I really wish we could just stay on and be together forever.
Yeah, I know.
But if we can't, I'm going to destroy you.
It's really hard. I mean, even that like silly demonstration, I just have
that
had
was a silly demonstration.
such a hard time with holding those boundaries, not sort of caving to those demands. I also do a fair amount of eating shit, which I kind of wanted to name also as a type of abandonment of self, where it's just like that,
Oh, yeah.
where I just like eat shit and I'm just like, I'm just hella traumatized. I'm just like a
I've
really
done
fucked
that
up
before,
person.
too.
I just like don't
It's
know
not
how
you,
to,
it's me,
it's not
and
you,
I
it's
suck.
me to the point where I'm just like a
Yeah.
failed state of a human.
That's hard because if you do have a friendship, then you have to. That's a lie. Just like it's a lie when somebody says, I don't want to date. You should never say, I'm sorry, I don't want to be in a relationship right now. Never use that as your reason for breaking up.
Right.
Because
You're saying
people
you don't want to be in this relationship. Right?
people
Yeah.
constantly break up saying, I just want to be single. And then they start dating and it feels like a betrayal.
Yeah.
That's never a good reason to break up. Even if you're thinking that's true, you can't predict or determine the future. It's unknowable,
Yeah.
And I would hate for anybody to limit themselves to that if like they found a relationship that really did suit them, even if it would have been good for them to be single longer.
Maybe this is obvious, but like, can you speak a little bit to why we want, when we get broken up with, why we want a reason so badly?
Yeah, I mean, I think just trying to make it make sense, and maybe it's better to just say this doesn't make sense to me right now, and or for the other person to say, I know this doesn't make sense right now, and I'm sorry, I can't help you with that.
Yeah.
I think there's also, I don't want to use this word too much, but I am saying it intentionally. Many breakups include inside of them a little tea trauma, where it's just like you were intimate with someone, you were imagining a life together, you thought the relationship was going forward, and then it wasn't. And if I were to, I don't want to like compare the end of a relationship to a car accident.
Oh my God, that's
But-
the thing that just popped into my head too. Yeah.
I think that you were expecting a certain future trajectory and reality, and it stopped. And so what our brains do in those situations is be like, it's a form of bargaining. It's like a stage of grief. It's just, you're like, what could I have done for this not to have happened? What could I have done for this not to have happened? Is there a universe where I did that and this didn't happen?
Well, I think this comes back to what we were talking about before, like not surprising each other with this kind of thing, and like being willing to bring something up earlier to be like, I'm not, Although, when we're thinking about like casual dating and stuff, like, there's a really big difference. I don't think you need to tell somebody you've only been on 2 dates with, like, hey, I think I might not continue with it. That's too much.
Yeah.
But actually, my friend a long time ago gave me advice after I'd gone on a first date, and she said, you have to say, I don't want to go on any more dates with you. Can you imagine how intense that is to say to somebody? It was wild. I did it on the phone.
I feel like I would do that and then like black out.
I felt like I was out of body while I was saying the words, but it's like that's actually what needed to be said, and there's no lack of clarity. It's actually what was true. I don't want to go on any more dates with you. And that's it. I mean, he also handled it well. We hung out as friends. And then like years later, we did hook up again a few times.
Oh my God. Oh
like,
my
like
God.
20 years
So
later.
you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah.
Even when
The
you
door
say.
is always open.
Well, he's a very sweet man.
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to touch on is the like staying friends thing, or like staying in community thing. And like, I think what I hear you saying is kind of, if you follow some of this stuff that is assertive in breakups and is not abandoning yourself and is not hedging, do you think that makes it more possible to stay in community or stay as friends? Like, what is your sort of playbook for that?
Well, I was thinking there's this book called I Thought We'd Never Speak Again. It's a book about reconciliation, but it's like one of my favorite self-help books. And there's different kinds of reconciliation. So I think basically you're talking about recovering from a change in boundaries or a change in relationship. You're going from one status to a different status, which is a difficult transition.
Yeah.
And so in that, it depends on how much somebody can cope with having a difficult feeling. And like we deal with this. Other boundary changes are like seeing your teacher outside of the classroom in the store, right? That's like need for dynamic boundaries to be like, okay, when I see my ex in the store that I feel so intense about, I have to remember that we're in a different context. And they might trigger those thoughts, but that's not happening right now. That requires a lot of self-awareness and skill, and so I think having a plan for when you're first seeing an ex, and those are self-enforced boundaries. You could ask for help from friends, but like also visualizing, getting help from somebody to visualize and plan. Like, what if I see this person? What if we have to stand next to each other? What if we say hi? How do I want to say hi? And maybe like role playing that a few times. I think getting through the first 3 or 4 times of seeing somebody out in public after you've had a breakup, just knowing how you're going to handle it is a really helpful way to have a boundary. And that can really make or break how things roll out. Because a lot of times there's a lot of drama right after a breakup, or you say things you regret, or maybe you hook up again right away and you're like, oh shit, I didn't mean to do that.
Seems to be a common theme.
For me?
For me? That was, what a good gesture. I really wish
No
we
comment.
captured that on video.
No comment. No comment. In that book, though, I brought it up because the most ideal thing people are looking for is both parties transform and we come to a new understanding about what's between us. And we both feel so good. You understand me, I understand you. That is a very small portion of reconciliations. That's what we imagine. I need this in order to feel peaceful. But you can still achieve peace even if you never speak again, right? There's also like we agree to disagree is another option. We can totally see each other, but we can't talk about the relationship, right? And that's pretty common. Like, we're cool. Yeah, we never get into the details. Like, parentheses, you hurt me, I hurt you. Let's just not talk about it, right? And then the other one is just like I change and I adjust myself and I don't worry about what you're doing. I can also gain peace by just being like, yeah, Alex is just like that, but I still want to be connected. And I'm willing to do that because he's a special guy.
Oh, he is a special guy.
Thank you.
Or and my wish to be in connection with him is so important to me.
Yeah. I love all of that. And I also want to put in a little plug for sometimes you don't want to continue the relationship. You don't want to have contact. And I think there's a little bit of unfair value judgment placed on that decision, that there's an assumption that being able to stay in relationship or in community or transition to friends with an ex is the ideal thing to do. It's like the more evolved way of breaking up. Whereas I would like to neutralize the other option as well, that sometimes the arc of a relationship really does end in the sort of like physical community sense. And that is not a bad choice in and of itself. And it doesn't even have to be a referendum on how important the relationship was. Anybody else agree? Anyone?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were talking about the topic, one idea I wanted to bring up is like, can we move towards no breakups, like fissures or like breaks where people are broken off from each other? Because when you're saying that, it made me think of a line people will say, like, I've invested so much into this relationship, I don't want to lose it. And it's sort of like I'm losing who I was during that time.
Yeah,
And
I've felt that, like the
Yeah.
grief of all of the time and how much of yourself you put into something. Like when it ends, there is like a grief there. That's not like about what I'm not going to have in the future, but it's almost like casting this like doubt on the authenticity of what it was in the past if you let it go.
I have had 2 breakups where there was an agreed upon kind of no contact going forward. I was thinking about the one where it was the other person who was just kind of like, I really care about you. This was a good relationship that I learned a lot from. We always knew that it had an end date because of the circumstances of their life. And I really want to honor that end date, which we agreed on, even though as we headed towards the end of the relationship, the feelings got more intense and the anxiety and angst about it ending also became more intense. So at the very end, there was a little bit of like, maybe we will stay together that lasted for, I think, like a week or 2. And then this person was like, I want to go back to the original honoring that we don't, and we don't pretend that we're going to be friends. That's not what this relationship really was. It's not feasible for us to do that. And I think it would be a dishonor to the relationship if we didn't. And it was like fucking intense. But in retrospect, well, it reveals that that person had a more emotional maturity than I did at the time in relationships, which I appreciate. And I learned a lot from it. And I think they were right. So I just wanted to mention that.
I love talking about good endings.
Yeah. It didn't feel like it at the time, but in retrospect, I really think they were right.
Well, I think knowing that everything ends,
Yeah.
and also almost every relationship ends in a divorce or breakup. I'm not trying to be like negative, but if it doesn't end in divorce, breakup, it ends in death. So, and well, I don't know where to go from there. It's just so
No, it's valid.
That
Yeah,
is
we
true.
joke a lot about, or I joke a lot about like that the destination being like side by side burial plots
Yeah.
or whatever. Like, yeah, where are we going together? Like,
Well, isn't that
It
kind of
ends, it all
sobering?
ends.
Because then if you're having a relationship with somebody, you've been together for X time, it's no surprise that the relationship's going to end at some point. And so I think talking about that with some regularity, not in a like we should, well, that brings up a whole other thing. I think a serious boundary people should respect is don't talk about breaking up unless you really mean it.
Yes.
Like never.
don't,
Yeah.
not,
Really,
like not
really agree
hypothetically,
with
but
that
don't
too,
be like,
yes.
I want to break up with you.
Yeah,
as
even
leverage
using the
to-
word breakup is kind of
absolutely.
triggering. But saying like, I'm having serious concerns, or I'm wondering if I can stay in this relationship if this continues, is a different framing than if this continues, I might have to break up. That's different. So just being cautious of that.
That there is a sort of, why do you say that? Why does that feel so right?
I think just the brain hears the word breakup, and it doesn't hear like, in order for me to stay, I'm having concerns about this, So it's just like, it's just immediately causes anxiety to hear breakup. And then you'll hear that person be like, they said they want to break up, So I think wise to stay away from that until you are absolutely sure it's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I don't want to jam this study in at the very end because I don't know that it's a perfect fit. But I did want to mention it, I guess, because this is a point of sensitivity for me.
You just don't want this to end, do you?
No, I don't.
Just keep hanging on.
I do. I'm sorry. But they were talking about how people who only are ever friends with exes, that is to say, there are a lot of people where that's like a requirement of theirs. It's a point of pride. It's incredibly important to them. that they actually can show like manipulative traits in those relationships. Because I think, as you were saying earlier, that ability to shift out of one kind of intimacy and really find another kind is maybe something they're avoiding. And so they're holding on to intimacy access in some way. Anyway.
But what about people who every single person they've been in a relationship with in the past is like a narcissistic sociopath that they,
Excuse me?
like there's the people who are like the opposite of that, where they just like
Have to leave.
like have to hate everybody that they've been in a relationship
yeah.
with in the past and frame them as like,
Yeah.
like evil. Like that's also a flag.
Yeah, that would be a huge yellow flag dating somebody new if they had that narrative. Okay, that's another boundary, whether or not to talk about your last partnerships or your breakup with a new person. I think at some point it's good to get that information about somebody,
But like maybe after a little while, right?
maybe not the first date. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But maybe also like getting a sense of who they are. I've had a mutual friend ask me about like, so who else have you dated? Because she wanted to know like, what are you going to be like?
Yeah.
Wait, and she was going to go like get the report from those other people?
Maybe.
Amazing.
All right.
Well,
Yeah. This was so good. I could go on. I love talking about this, Calvin.
You guys are so good. I really appreciate getting a chance to come back, and I love your
Is
podcast.
there anything else you want to say before this ends?
Well, just the good endings concept. When we know that everything ends, then we can bring our intention to have a good ending. And when we notice that something's about to end, that's a time for the awareness to click on and to be like, okay, it's ending, and to not fight it and not create a situation where I'm like going with my heels dug in. Even if I'm so sad and angry and stuff, I can also try to show up in my best self, because things end. That's not the tragedy itself, That's like a natural force in the universe.
Takes us all the way back to you liking poop
That's right.
at the beginning of the podcast. Because it's all part of a system where things have to die so that they can replenish the earth. You see what I did there?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
It's inevitable. Everything turns to shit.
Which doesn't mean, you gotta feel your feelings. Don't block your feelings, but also don't make them an emergency or a problem to solve. It's like Joanna Macy, brilliant human being, now ancestor. Our duty as sentient beings, if you accept this duty, no pressure, is to observe and witness nature and feel the feelings that come up. Don't take ownership of them. We're feeling on behalf of the planet, and our role, if we so accept, is to feel, process, and then release, and to say, like, I did what I could with that feeling. And so when any feeling comes through me, I don't have to take ownership of it. It doesn't have to be an emergency. If it's too much for me to handle, I can ask to release it. It's not my responsibility to hold on to it forever or to completely resolve it. That would be impossible.
Yeah. It's a wonderful place to end at. Thank you, Calvin.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Calvin. I think we did what we could with this episode, and now it's time to release. Thank
Take
you
us
for listening to Mistakes Were Made. We'll be back in 2 weeks with the second half of our episode about who has it harder in opening a relationship. And in the meantime, find us at mistakescast@gmail.com and on Instagram at mistakescast as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.